William Shatner making history Wednesday, becoming the oldest person to visit space.
There are hundreds of billions of galaxies in our universe, untold planets beyond our solar system. And I spent decades pretending to explore space. And then I got the chance to go there, for real.
No description can be good.
I'm William Shatner, and I'm back. And I want to know, is anybody out there?
I'm convinced that there's life elsewhere in the universe.
There's numerous indications that they are interacting with us. They are studying us.
We scan the skies. We send probes to distant planets. We track mysterious objects, searching for signs of alien life. And now, credible reports are coming back.
More UFO whistleblowers are breaking their silence. I know pilots that have specifically picked up night flights in order to go check out what they all call the light show.
It's not ridiculous. It's real. It's in our airspace. We need to find out what it is.
It will suddenly change direction.
The discussion has moved from science fiction to the halls of Congress.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely.
We're going to uncover the cover-up.
But is this newfound transparency a genuine effort to get to the truth? Or is someone hiding something?
It's a great question.
People often wonder, can the government keep a secret? And I will tell you absolutely yes.
What are we going to do if suddenly extraterrestrials arrive? What if it comes with a dark side?
We asked pilots, space psychologists, and government officials the big question: are there aliens among us? For years, claims of alien sightings were treated with suspicion, even contempt. But something has fundamentally changed. There is footage. But we don't say UFO anymore. We say UAP.
That's not our LNS, is it?
The term stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon. We can't slot it somewhere. We don't know how to characterize it. It's not a jet, it's not a missile, it's not a rocket. What is that thing?
Chris Mellon worked with the Office of Naval Intelligence in the Pentagon. His article in the Washington Post turned a lot of heads.
We have reports of things up to maybe a half a kilometer across. Typically, though, they're smaller. A lot of sphere-shaped objects, some of them 6 feet across. I became aware, was quite shocked to learn that our pilots were encountering these UAP like on an almost daily basis.
We'd pick up a bunch of objects where there's not supposed to be anyone. And these are objects that we weren't seeing perhaps just on the flight before.
Ryan Graves is a fighter pilot, the real deal. What he saw from his F-18 defied explanation.
They weren't just flickering in or out. They would either be stationary over the ground for long periods of time, and then they would accelerate to 1.1 to 1.2 Mach. So that's slightly over the speed of sound. There'd be 3 to 6 of them maneuvering in a way that was inconsistent and against the wind. It was strange.
No matter the weather, UAPs were always there.
We'd often see them in Category 3 hurricane winds, 120, 140 knots, where these objects would be stationary.
At first, Ryan assumed the dots on his radar were technical glitches.
That was the status quo for a couple of weeks until we flew close enough to one of these objects inadvertently that our camera system, which is linked to our radar, is now locking on to these objects. We were picking up heat energy coming from where the radar was picking up this contact. We had to assume that our systems were actually detecting something physical in the sky and that for whatever reason, we just couldn't physically see it.
Ryan decided to take a closer look.
We would slow down as slow as we can reasonably go, about 200 knots or so. We'd pick an object that was stationary. We'd get about 800 feet below it, and we'd basically come up on it. As it comes by us, we're looking, and we don't see anything, nothing. We turn back around, and all our sensors will re-pick it up. For us to be missing something, 200 knots is somewhat inexplicable.
It's not just pilots who can't believe their eyes.
As we prepare for takeoff, please fasten your seatbelt. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
Passengers are also reporting UAP. There was an interesting case. A woman took a picture of a black object, maybe bigger than a car, around that size, strange angular shape, as the plane was taking off. This is a global phenomenon. It's relatively commonplace. It's been going on for a long time, and yet it remains very mysterious.
Even Ghostbusters see UAPs.
You said you've seen 4 of them. Tell us more about it.
Well, the most spectacular one that I saw was about 50 feet away from me and on the 23rd floor of a hotel in Montreal. We looked out the window and there was this big gray object, 100 feet long, 50 feet high, with it looked like a bunch of grapes underneath it. And then it kind of turned slowly, no sound, and it just drifted off. We ran out into the hall and saw it drift over the St. Lawrence River. Now, that thing was not a helicopter, was not a meteoric bolide, was not any kind of aircraft.
We received between 200 and 300 UFO reports each year. Some of these UAPs did appear to defy the laws of physics.
Nick Pope worked for the British Ministry of Defense for 21 years.
For much of the early 90s, I ran their UFO program. So my job was to research and investigate the phenomenon, to assess the defense, national security, and safety of flight implications. The things that really interested us were when it was performing speeds, maneuvers, and accelerations that went beyond anything we had, or went beyond anything that our intelligence people said that other nations might have.
Whatever they may be, UAPs are definitely a safety issue. But pilots like Ryan still need to fly.
A few guys were trying to still go and identify these objects visually, but most of the time we were just out there trying to do our training. But that changed about 5 weeks later when we actually almost hit one of these objects unexpectedly. As the 2 aircraft were entering the area and tightening up, the lead pilot saw an object go within 50 feet down his right wing between the 2 aircraft. He described it as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere. He estimated it to be about 5 to 15 feet in diameter. And that was the first time that we had actually visually seen one of these objects that we had been detecting with all our sensors. He ended up canceling the flight right after that, and he came back to land. I saw him standing in the red room with his gear on, and he explained it, that I almost hit one of those darn things. We all knew exactly what he was talking about, although we didn't really have a name for it, and we weren't really officially acknowledging it. That was the point that started the paperwork trail.
Ryan soon learned that several other near misses had gone unreported. Pilots, it seems, were afraid to talk.
We were having near mid-air collisions, so much so they were posting warning notices at Navy bases. It was just astonishing to me that we spend so much money on intelligence to protect America, and now here, when we actually are suffering a violation of our sovereign airspace, nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody's even reporting it.
Army fighter planes are on patrol for flying saucers. Cameras installed to photograph them. Portland, Oregon, the area from which came the first weird reports.
Now, if history has taught us anything, UAP sightings are riddled with mystery, doubt, and suspicion.
Some of the flagship cases are, of course, Roswell, which is not just a metaphorical but a literal ground zero for all of this. It was the US military that caused a press release to be issued saying, we have recovered one of these flying saucers. Now, within 24 hours, they changed the story and said it was just a weather balloon. So a lot of people came forward over the years to say, no, that was just a cover story. It really was something extraterrestrial.
A generation after Roswell, there was a close encounter in Texas. This one was reported by locals Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum.
The Cash Landrum case from 1980 is intriguing and disturbing because this was the sighting of a large diamond-shaped craft that came very close to a car. One of them got out of the car to try and get a better look. People were screaming, "Get back in, get back in." There was a heat source from this craft. And subsequently, the people got sick with what some thought was radiation poisoning.
24 years later, off the coast of Southern California, 2 Navy pilots reported what has come to be known as the Tic Tac incident.
We noticed something in the water that seemed to be disturbing the water or making it churn.
In 2004, there was a very interesting and close interaction between fighter pilots from the USS Nimitz and a Tic Tac object. We call it that colloquially because it's shaped like a Tic Tac.
Dr. Michael Masters is an anthropology professor and author. He researched this phenomenon for over a decade.
It played sort of a cat and mouse game with Alex Dietrich and David Fravor, the pilots of these aircraft. They could see it from above, they circled, and as they engaged this aircraft, it started to move and sort of chase them, and they chased it.
We don't know what it was. It could have been a natural phenomenon, it could have been human activity, but the point was that it was weird and we couldn't recognize it, and so it was off our US shores, very close to a military exercise, and so we need to do our due diligence to make sure it wasn't a threat to national security, a danger to safety of flight.
Afterwards, David Fravor said, "Well, I don't know what it was, but I want to fly one." These top guns, they don't impress very easily, so when someone like that says, "I want to fly one," it tells you something about how this technology clearly significantly more advanced than anything that we're flying.
No one knows for certain what UAPs are. That's why they're unidentified. But everyone has a theory.
Part of me is thinking aliens have looked on Earth and then they ran back home and said, "There's no sign of intelligence." so that's why we actually haven't been visited. They said, "No, we're not coming near this."
But for witnesses, this is no laughing matter.
It starts to get very complicated when you talk about who could it be or what could it be. Is it an alien from another planet? Is it some crazy interdimensional thing? Is all of that nonsense and it has to be Iran or China?
There is not a single neat solution to this mystery.
Could UAP be non-human intelligence of some sort? The answer is yes, absolutely. And frankly, we shouldn't be shocked if that proves to be the case. It's a question of how many such civilizations, what is the proximity, and what kind of technology do they have?
But perhaps the biggest question is, are they friend or foe?
What are we going to do if suddenly extraterrestrials arrive? Particularly if it's not all love and light and E.T. What if it comes with a dark side? What if there is a secret about this that the government thinks is too terrible to tell the people?
The government absolutely can keep secrets, and it does. We have platforms that the Pentagon has acknowledged are causing some of these sightings, but there's a great number that don't fall into that category, and those are the ones we're concerned about.
That concern is a fundamental national security threat.
We need to have a clear understanding of who is in our airspace or the whole system collapses. And so if we give that up on our home turf, it's a massive national security failure.
One of the really important revelations in recent years came in a June 2021 interim assessment issued by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And they firstly categorized UAP as a potential national security threat to the US. This wasn't just people seeing things. It talked about how some of these UAP were taking deliberate actions to hide themselves.
The national security issue here, for me at least, arose when I learned that we were having intrusions in sensitive, restricted military airspace on a routine, recurring basis, and nobody was reporting it up the chain of command.
An adversary would have the motive for being in that area. They would potentially have the motivation to expend a lot of resources to be able to spy on us.
There's a concern that a potential adversary may have had a major technological breakthrough that could allow them to achieve strategic surprise and perhaps compromise our national security.
If it's an adversary here on Earth, at least we can figure out how to respond. But if it's another kind of civilization, we might just be a human zoo.
It seems to me that they would be driven by those same curiosities and desires to seek knowledge, and they would explore and come here. And again, in a universe nearly 14 billion years old, there might be civilizations out there with a billion years head start on us.
A billion-year head start? What kind of civilization would that even look like? Well, a team at Harvard has a few ideas.
According to a new Harvard study, aliens might be living among us, right here on Earth, disguised as humans. And all the UFO sightings we hear about, those are just spaceships from other planets coming to visit their alien friends here on Earth.
I recently co-authored a paper with a couple Harvard researchers to begin to move past the question of are UFOs real and to start taking them seriously and to think about some potential explanations for them.
Dr. Masters offers several theories about extraterrestrials.
They may be an offshoot, either of a very, very ancient tetrapod or potentially dinosaur population. And this gets a little more skeptical, but we wanted to consider everything.
Another possibility is that aliens travel through time to get here.
They could have come from a different star system or potentially from Earth's future.
Stephen Hawking once said that if we encountered extraterrestrials, it would be like when the European explorers encountered the Native Americans, only this time we'd all be the Native Americans.
According to the report, aliens may already be here.
It's an idea that we could have advanced beings living in Earth's environs, whether it be in the deep ocean, in volcanoes or mountains on the far side of the moon.
They might even be closer than we think.
They could be sequestering themselves underground here on Earth.
If aliens indeed walk among or under us, is it really possible that they've never been spotted? And if they have, is our government capable of keeping a secret like that?
Imagine you're the President of the United States, and you learn after you're sworn in that the United States has proof, conclusive physical evidence that we're not alone in the universe, we're not even alone here on Earth. I think most politicians would understandably not want to be the person who delivers that message.
It might be easier to deliver that message with physical evidence. One researcher claims to have it.
There was a study at Stanford University led by Dr. Gary Nolan.
Dr. Gary Nolan is one of the pioneering scientists who's done work into the human effects of interaction with UAP.
I mean, some of the people who I know were so intrigued by what they were seeing, they felt that they had to walk up and touch it because this couldn't possibly be real.
Dr. Nolan studies the brains of people who have come into contact with UAPs.
He's found what appear to be strange white mass in the brains of some pilots who have come very close to these objects.
What we had done was, in looking at some of these MRIs, we had noticed damage in the brain, white matter disease it's called. Those white tracts there are just damage to the brain. Those are dead areas of the brain.
And they found a particular part of the brain of these individuals was enlarged. We don't know if it's cause or effect.
We are talking burn marks, brain damage, frankly, cognitive issues. I've heard of other effects on balance and hearing.
These symptoms are familiar. They've been seen in patients diagnosed with something called Havana syndrome.
Havana syndrome is effectively people getting sick, possibly through being targeted by some sort of directed energy, maybe weapon. It was first noticed in Cuba, and US diplomats and government employees were apparently being deliberately targeted by this.
December 29, 2016, Adam, who worked for the U.S. government at the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, became patient zero, the first victim of what has since been described as Havana syndrome, suffering from vertigo, dizziness, and in some cases, brain injuries.
A few years ago, Havana syndrome would have been just dismissed as a conspiracy theory, but now we have people in the system speaking out about this.
If you see something, say something. That goes for UAPs as well. Today, more and more eyewitnesses, like Ryan Graves, are finding the courage to speak out.
Initially, I just came forward because my colleagues that were flying on the Eastern Seaboard and elsewhere, we were nearly hitting these objects. And there was no communication about it. There was no mitigation process that was happening. There was no investigation to whether there were adversaries spying on our aircraft. And the next time we went into a major conflict, they're going to know all our secrets and know how to defeat us. And so that was my concern.
In 2023, Ryan founded Americans for Safe Aerospace to educate policymakers.
And the purpose was simply to be able to utilize the tools of Washington, D.C. to motivate our politicians to be able to treat this issue more respectfully.
But soon a second mission emerged.
What we were not expecting to do was to basically formalize a reporting mechanism because we were receiving so many reports from pilots that wanted to share their experiences.
So with pilots and with astronauts, they would always be very protective of what they say because that will affect their career.
Dr. Aya Whiteley is an aviation and space psychologist. She has worked with pilots for 25 years.
If they're saying they're seeing something, it is just irresponsible not to give them absolute certainty and credibility to what they're reporting.
But some pilots don't want to report UAPs.
I think part of this is the fear that you will be disbelieved or ridiculed, but part of it is the very real concern that you will be sent for a psychological evaluation and you will be grounded.
Dr. Whiteley spoke with Ryan Graves about the emotional impact on pilots.
They lose families, their children suffer, so like big consequences, and some people never recover. Some people commit suicide. It's that bad.
So Japanese pilot was flying around Anchorage and he saw some big objects following him that was incredibly massive. And as a result, he is assigned a desk job.
And of course, for a pilot to lose their wings, that's pretty much the worst thing in the world.
I had this very interesting conversations point out to me over air traffic control, where 3 aircrafts are speaking.
Yeah, it's Air Canada 7086. Do you guys see these lights at 12 o'clock? Yeah, forming triangles and then flying away and coming back.
So the piece of that conversation goes, we are seeing this. Do you see anything on radar? They would say, no, I don't. Then another aircraft comes in and says, we're seeing it too.
I had one other report 10 minutes ago from Morningstar flight east of Regina, reporting the same thing.
And then says, do you have anything to add?
Gonna add to that, I haven't seen them tonight, but we've been seeing those lights for probably the last 18 months or so, just for your information, if you wanted to add that.
And it's not just military pilots who see UAPs.
Military and commercial pilots are both encountering these phenomenon on a regular basis.
We just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object. It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast that went right over the top of us.
If I'm flying on a commercial flight where the pilot is seeing something for 18 months, why is it considered as if they're imagining it? We trust them with our life.
We might be at risk simply flying from New York to Los Angeles on an everyday commercial aircraft. We may all have to consider, are the skies safe?
With so much at stake, the U.S. government has been studying UAP sightings for decades.
The U.S. government became involved in this issue during World War II, when military pilots were reporting what they called Foo Fighters, balls of light following them. Then, when we got into testing nuclear weapons, there was a sudden surge and an increase of UAP sightings around Los Alamos and other nuclear facilities.
But those programs were shrouded in secrecy, and that only made things worse.
A big part of that lingering stigma has to do with intentional debunking campaigns set up in the 1940s, 50s, and through the 60s.
Project Blue Book was the Air Force program to investigate UAP sightings.
Project Blue Book especially, where scientists like myself were used to delegitimize the phenomenon and stigmatize it, and to get people to not talk about it.
More than 12,000 sightings were reported. More than 700 remain unidentified. But Project Blue Book was shuttered in 1969.
Fortunately, we've been chipping away at that, especially since the 2017 New York Times article, where it really broke open the conversation. They acknowledged the AATIP program, a $22 million black budget program to study UAPs.
There's no more hiding behind the green curtain, if you will. Now, hopefully, America is going to know just a small portion of what I was privy to when I was running the program.
The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, known as AATIP, reportedly examined incidents of military pilots who claimed to see flying objects that defied the laws of physics.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. It's rotating.
When I saw that New York Times article come out, I couldn't remember where I'd seen this video from. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my buddy's voice, that's the video. And that's when I realized that nothing was happening. There was no internal process that was going to be triggered, and that this video being released in the New York Times was essentially a cry for help.
When the press started reporting this, it was a public relations nightmare for them to some degree. And they concluded that it's not worth investigating. The Air Force said, thank you very much. They shut it down. And that was the end of that.
One thing's for certain. Many believers think that the government knows more than they're letting on. A Pentagon official came forward this week revealing their 7-minute encounter with a glowing turquoise UFO, which gave off enough energy to power a city. That official isn't alone. More UFO whistleblowers are breaking their silence and exposing what they've seen.
Despite significant risks to their careers, 3 high-profile military officers came forward.
The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had.
Retired Navy Commander David Fravor testified about the strange tic-tac shaped object he saw during a training mission in 2004.
What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken. And after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends.
The objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
The most shocking revelations came from Air Force officer David Grush.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General.
Grush blew the whistle on a top-secret government program tasked with retrieving UAPs that crashed.
I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
David Grush talked about these non-human intelligences. He said, we have recovered craft, we have recovered bodies, but he said that even before Congress, he would not be able to go into the details unless they were in a secure, compartmented information facility, a shielded room, no cell phones, no windows, so there's no electronic eavesdropping, all of that.
Now that the word is out, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are demanding answers.
The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Those are not the words of a UFO Twitter account. That is a direct quote from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer.
There's a push for the public to get more information, and as taxpayers, we deserve that. For the vast majority of the population to really get on board with this, we're going to need more whistleblowers coming forward so we can know what's going on.
It's a travesty that we don't have a system to correlate this and actually investigate.
We need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs.
For Ryan Graves, this issue is personal.
I would tell pilots, you're not the only one. Come to safeaerospace.org, report your incident. We're doing scientific studies on it. We're forwarding it for national security concerns to the right agencies. So your reports will matter. They won't just get copied into a database, but they will be actionable.
It's critical that we don't dismiss this because of our preconceived skeptical notions about all this being ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It's real. It's in our airspace. We need to find out what it is.
There's no way to know for sure if aliens are at our doorstep, at least not yet. But one thing is certain. Credible people have questions that cannot be ignored.
Do you guys see these lights at 12 o'clock? We've been seeing those lights for probably the last 18 months or so. Just for your information, if you wanted to add that.